The conference room felt smaller than it actually was. 23 pairs of eyes locked onto the projection screen where my financial report glowed in harsh fluorescent light. My hands trembled slightly as I clicked to the next slide, revealing the discrepancies I'd spent 6 weeks uncovering. Numbers that didn't add up, transfers that seemed to evaporate into thin air, patterns that whispered of something deliberately hidden. I'd practiced this presentation 47 times in my apartment, rehearsing every word, every pause, every anticipated question. But nothing prepared me for what happened when I reached slide 12. "Your reports are wrong, Aaliyah." Daniel Whitmore's voice cut through my explanation like a blade through silk. The CFO stood up from his seat at the head of the table, his gray suit immaculate, his smile perfectly calibrated to convey disappointment rather than anger. That smile was worse than shouting. It was the smile of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. "Don't question what you don't understand." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I felt my throat tighten, my carefully prepared responses dissolving like sugar in rain. Around the table, I watched colleagues who'd smiled at me that morning suddenly find their laptops fascinating. The VP of Operations shifted uncomfortably. The HR director looked down at her notes. No one met my eyes. I wanted to scream that I'd triple-checked every figure, that I'd cross-referenced bank statements with internal ledgers, that the inconsistencies weren't errors. They were breadcrumbs leading to something much bigger. But my voice had abandoned me, left me standing there with my clicker in hand and my credibility in pieces on the polished mahogany table. Daniel gestured dismissively at my presentation. "We'll revisit the quarterly reports using the corrected data." "Thank you, Aaliyah. That'll be all. As if I were a waitress who'd brought the wrong order. As if 6 weeks of meticulous work could be erased with 7 words and a practiced smile. I gathered my laptop with hands that didn't feel like my own and walked toward the door. The silence behind me was deafening. Not the silence of respect, but the silence of witnesses who'd chosen not to see. Just as I reached for the handle, I heard Daniel's voice again, lighter now, almost jovial. "Everyone makes mistakes when they're still learning." I didn't turn around. I didn't give him the satisfaction. But in that moment, standing at the threshold with my back to a room full of people who should have questioned him, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to accept being wrong when I knew I was right. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that 3 months later, I'd be standing in that same conference room with external auditors presenting evidence with my name on it. Evidence that would prove everything I'd said was true. Evidence that would show exactly who had altered those files. Evidence that would reveal the man in the gray suit wasn't just dismissive. He was desperate. Before we continue, I'd love to know, what city are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments below. Let's see how far this story travels. I didn't cry in the elevator. That felt important somehow, like a small victory I could claim in a day that had stolen everything else. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors, twist out still perfectly intact, burgundy blouse still crisp, silver hoops still catching the light. I looked exactly like I had that morning when I'd left my apartment buzzing with nervous energy and practiced confidence. But something fundamental had shifted. I could feel it in the way my chest felt hollow, like someone had reached in and scooped out whatever part of me had believed that good work and thorough preparation would be enough. The elevator descended 43 floors, and with each floor, I replayed the meeting in my mind. The way Daniel had waited until I was 12 slides deep before interrupting. The way he'd positioned himself physically, standing while I remained seated, commanding the room's attention while systematically dismantling my credibility. The way no one had asked a single follow-up question. Not one. When the doors opened to the lobby, I walked past the security desk where Jerome usually greeted me with stories about his grandson's baseball games. Today he was helping another visitor, and I was grateful. I didn't trust my voice yet. Didn't trust what might come out if I tried to speak. The October air hit me as I pushed through the revolving doors, crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of roasting pecans from the street vendor on the corner. Atlanta in autumn had always been my favorite, the way the city seemed to exhale after the suffocating humidity of summer. I stood there for a moment, briefcase in hand, watching professionals stream past me with their coffee cups and important phone calls and purposeful strides. I checked my phone, 10:47 a.m. The meeting had lasted exactly 23 minutes. 23 minutes to dismantle 6 weeks of work. My apartment was only a 15-minute walk from the office, a deliberate choice when I'd taken the job 3 years ago. I'd wanted to be the kind of professional who could walk to work, who belonged in the financial district, who earned her place at the table through excellence and precision. Now that walk felt different. Every step away from the gleaming tower that housed Meridian Financial Group felt like retreat. But I wasn't retreating. Not really. My mind was already working, already analyzing what had just happened with the same methodical approach I applied to balance sheets and cash flow statements. The discrepancies I'd found weren't minor. Over 18 months, I'd identified nearly $2.7 million in transfers that lacked proper documentation. The money moved through subsidiary accounts in patterns that seemed almost deliberately complex, like someone had designed the transactions to be just confusing enough to discourage questions. Amounts were always just below the threshold that triggered automatic audits. Timing coincided with quarter-end closings when everyone was too busy to scrutinize details. I'd noticed it almost by accident 3 months ago while preparing routine quarterly reports. A vendor payment that appeared twice under slightly different names. When I'd looked deeper, I'd found more duplications, more inconsistencies, more threads that seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. My apartment building appeared ahead, a renovated warehouse conversion with exposed brick and industrial windows. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my unit, muscle memory carrying me while my thoughts spiraled. Inside, I dropped my briefcase by the door and stood in the middle of my living room, suddenly unsure what to do with myself. The space was small, but intentionally arranged. Bookshelves lined with finance textbooks and African American literature, plants cascading from macrame hangers, a gallery wall of framed quotes from Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, and Audre Lorde. My grandmother's quilt draped over the secondhand couch. Everything here told the story of who I was trying to become. Educated, grounded, ascending. I made tea. Chamomile with honey, the ritual my mother had taught me for moments when the world felt too sharp. The kettle's whistle cut through the silence, and I poured water over the tea bag, watching it bloom in the clear mug. Such a simple transformation. Add heat, and suddenly everything changes. My laptop sat on the dining table where I'd left it that morning, surrounded by printed reports and sticky notes covered in my handwriting. I'd been so meticulous. Every claim in my presentation was backed by 3 sources. Every discrepancy was documented with screenshots and timestamps. I'd even prepared a separate appendix anticipating the most likely objections. None of it had mattered. I opened my laptop and pulled up the presentation file. Then I opened the shared drive where I'd stored the original source documents. My fingers paused over the keyboard as something cold settled in my stomach. The files had been modified 2 hours ago, while I was in that meeting. I clicked through document after document, my tea growing cold beside me. Numbers had been changed, subtle alterations that wouldn't jump out at a casual glance, but enough to make my calculations appear incorrect. A decimal point shifted here, a date adjusted there, enough to transform legitimate discrepancies into Analyst error. Someone had accessed my research while I stood in that conference room. Someone had altered evidence while I was being publicly discredited, and there was only one person with both motive and access to do something like that. My phone buzzed. A text from my coworker, Jennifer. "Are you okay?" That meeting was brutal. I stared at the message for a long moment before setting the phone face down on the table. I wasn't ready for sympathy. Sympathy would make it real. Sympathy would confirm that what happened was as bad as it felt. I needed something else. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. For the next 4 hours, I worked with the kind of focus that comes from equal parts anger and purpose. I documented every change to every file, noting the exact timestamps. I searched my email archives for the original versions I'd sent myself during the research phase. I created a parallel record of everything: screenshots, PDFs, even photographs of my printed reports taken with my phone's camera. If someone was willing to alter files to discredit me, they were protecting something worth protecting. And if they thought a public humiliation would make me back down, they didn't know me at all. My grandmother used to say that some people mistake quiet for weak. She'd raised my mother alone after my grandfather died, worked as a bookkeeper for 40 years at a firm that never promoted her beyond assistant, saved enough to send my mother to college. She taught me that dignity wasn't about being loud. It was about being certain I was certain now. Certain that I'd been right. Certain that someone had been threatened enough by my accuracy to try to destroy it. Certain that this was bigger than a junior analyst's bruised ego. As evening light filtered through my windows, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow, I created a new folder on my laptop. I titled it Evidence, and began organizing everything systematically. Every original document, every screenshot, every email, every note. I didn't know yet what I would do with this evidence. Didn't know who I could trust at Meridian Financial Group. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. Monday morning arrived with the kind of reluctance that made every alarm snooze feel like a small rebellion. I'd spent the weekend in my apartment, alternating between obsessive document review and long stretches of staring at my ceiling, trying to decide what kind of person I wanted to be. The kind who stayed quiet to keep her job, or the kind who spoke up knowing it might cost her everything. My mother called Sunday evening. She always had impeccable timing, some maternal radar that detected when I was spiraling. "You sound tired, baby," she'd said, her voice carrying that particular note of concern that made my chest ache. "Just work stuff." "Mama, nothing serious." The lie tasted bitter. But how could I explain that I was caught in something I didn't fully understand yet? That I'd discovered evidence of financial misconduct and been publicly humiliated for it? That I was afraid and angry and uncertain all at once? "Remember what your grandmother used to say," my mother had continued, as if she could read my thoughts across the phone line. "Sometimes the right path is the one that scares you most." Now, standing in front of my closet Monday morning, I chose my clothes like armor. Navy blue sheath dress, simple gold necklace, my grandmother's pearl earrings, professional, competent, unshakable. The woman in the mirror looked ready for anything. I hoped she wasn't lying. The walk to the office felt longer than usual. Each step required intention, like I was moving through water. I kept my head up, my shoulders back, my expression neutral. But inside, my stomach churned with a mixture of dread and defiance. The elevator ride to the 40th floor was mercifully empty. I used those 60 seconds to breathe, to center myself, to remember why I'd worked so hard to get here. 3 years ago, I'd been one of 12 candidates selected from hundreds for Meridian's junior analyst program. I'd graduated top of my class at Georgia State with a degree in finance and a minor in accounting. I'd spent countless nights studying while my friends were out living their 20s without spreadsheets and statistical models haunting their dreams. I'd earned my place here. Daniel Whitmore's dismissiveness didn't change that. The office was already buzzing when I arrived. I could feel the shift in energy immediately, that particular quality of awareness that follows workplace drama. Conversations paused fractionally as I walked past. Eyes tracked my movement before quickly looking away. The sympathetic smiles were somehow worse than the avoiding gazes. My cubicle was in the far corner of the Analyst bay, a small space I'd personalized with a succulent garden and a framed print of Gordon Parks' photography. I set down my bag and powered on my computer, determined to project normalcy even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Aaliyah. I turned to find Jennifer standing at the edge of my cubicle, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was the closest thing I had to a friend at Meridian, a senior analyst who'd mentored me during my first year. White woman, early 30s, always quick with advice about navigating corporate politics that she made sound simple but never quite was. "Thought you could use this," she said, offering one of the cups. "Thanks." I accepted it, grateful for the warmth against my palms. Jennifer glanced around before lowering her voice. "Look, about Thursday's meeting. That was..." Daniel was out of line. "We all knew your work was solid. Did you?" The words came out sharper than I intended. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. I wanted to say something. "But you know how it is. He's the CFO, and I'm up for promotion this quarter, and..." She trailed off, the unfinished sentence hanging between us like an accusation. I understood what she wasn't saying. She had calculated the cost of defending me and found it too expensive. Part of me wanted to be angry, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of a system where doing the right thing required courage that could cost you everything. "It's fine, Jennifer," I appreciate the coffee. She nodded, relief flickering across her face at being released from the discomfort of accountability. If you need anything, you know where to find me. After she left, I sat there for a moment, staring at the steam rising from my cup. The office hummed around me, keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the low murmur of professional conversation. Everything continuing as if Thursday had never happened, as if my credibility hadn't been shredded in front of the entire leadership team. I opened my email. 43 unread messages since Friday afternoon. Most were routine. Meeting invitations, project updates, company-wide announcements. But 3 messages made my pulse quicken. The first was from Daniel Whitmore. Sent Friday at 4:47 p.m. Aaliyah, please see me first thing Monday morning to discuss your performance review and next steps for your development. DW Performance Review. Development. Corporate euphemisms for what was probably a formal reprimand, maybe worse. The second email was from HR. Sent Friday at 5:15 p.m. This is to confirm your meeting with Daniel Whitmore and HR representative Patricia Gonzalez scheduled for Monday, October 16th at 9:30 a.m., Conference Room B. So it was official then. HR involvement meant this wasn't just a casual conversation. They were building a paper trail. The third email was from an address I didn't recognize. Marcus.hayes@meridianfg.com. Sent Saturday at 11:52 p.m. Subject line: You should know something. My finger hovered over the touchpad. I didn't know any Marcus Hayes. The IT directory showed he worked in systems analysis 2 floors below. We'd never interacted as far as I could remember. I clicked. Aaliyah, I hope this message doesn't alarm you, but I felt you should be aware that your research files were accessed and modified on Thursday morning between 10:15 and 10:35 a.m. from an administrative login. The changes were made while you were in the quarterly review meeting. I can provide detailed logs if needed. I'm sorry for what happened to you in that meeting. Some of us see what's really going on. Marcus Hayes, Systems Analysis. I read it 3 times, my coffee growing cold in my hands. Someone in IT had noticed. Someone had evidence that my files were deliberately altered. Someone was offering to help. The question was, could I trust him? Or was this another trap? I glanced at the clock. 8:47 a.m. I had 43 minutes before the meeting with Daniel and HR. 43 minutes to decide how to play this. Walk in compliant and apologetic, accepting whatever narrative they'd constructed, or walk in with knowledge that I'd been sabotaged. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Marcus from IT. Don't respond if you're not somewhere private. Just want you to know, you're not crazy and you're not wrong. The evidence is still there if you know where to look. My hands trembled slightly as I set down my phone. This was real. Someone else had seen what happened. Someone else knew. The office suddenly felt different. Not safer exactly, but less isolating. I wasn't alone in seeing the truth, even if I was alone in being willing to risk everything for it. I spent the next 30 minutes preparing. Not with notes or rehearsed speeches, but with clarity. I printed Marcus's email and placed it in a folder with other documentation I'd compiled over the weekend. I wasn't planning to reveal everything in this meeting. That would be tactically foolish. But I wanted Daniel to know that I wasn't broken. That his performance on Thursday hadn't achieved what he'd hoped. At 9:25 a.m., I stood and smoothed my dress. Several colleagues watched me walk toward the elevators, their expressions ranging from curiosity to pity. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Conference Room B was smaller than the one where Thursday's disaster had unfolded. Intimate, which somehow made it worse. Daniel sat at the head of the table, Patricia from HR beside him with her laptop open and her expression professionally neutral. The kind of neutral that meant she'd already decided how this would go. Aaliyah, thank you for coming, Daniel said, his voice warm with false concern. Please sit. I sat, keeping my folder closed in front of me, my hands relaxed on the table. I'd read once that showing your palms was a sign of openness and honesty. I kept my palms visible. Patricia began with the script I'd expected. We wanted to discuss some concerns about your recent presentation and overall approach to your responsibilities. Daniel has noted some areas where additional training might be beneficial. Additional training. the corporate phrase for "you're incompetent, but we're going to pretend we're helping you." Daniel leaned forward, his expression perfectly calibrated for concerned leadership. "Aaliyah, I want to be clear. We value your dedication. But accuracy is paramount in financial analysis. The discrepancies you claim to find were based on misunderstanding of our accounting systems. Rather than asking questions before presenting, you made assumptions that could have damaged client relationships and internal confidence." I let him finish. Let him lay out his version of events where I was an overeager junior analyst who'd overstepped. Then I spoke, keeping my voice level and professional. "I appreciate your feedback. However, I'd like to understand something. The files I used for my analysis were modified on Thursday morning while I was presenting. Can you explain why administrative changes were made to my source documents during the meeting?" The room went very still. Patricia's fingers paused over her keyboard. Daniel's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Calculation? Before being smoothed away? "I'm not sure what you're referring to," he said carefully. "I have the system logs showing file modifications with timestamps. I also have the original versions of my research saved externally. The discrepancies I identified were accurate before someone altered the supporting documentation." Patricia looked between us, her professional neutrality cracking slightly. "Aaliyah, these are serious allegations. I'm aware, which is why I'm being very careful to state only what I can prove." Daniel's smile was thin now, stripped of its earlier warmth. "It sounds like you're suggesting some kind of conspiracy, Aaliyah. That's not a productive mindset for someone who made errors in analysis. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. My files were altered. I can demonstrate that they were altered. And I'd like to understand why." The silence stretched. Patricia was typing now, her expression troubled. Daniel sat back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "I think," he said finally, "we all need some time to review these claims thoroughly. Patricia, let's reconvene. This meeting after we've examined the technical details Aaliyah is referencing. Aaliyah, please send any documentation you have to HR within 24 hours. It wasn't the victory I'd hoped for, but it wasn't defeat either. I'd put them on notice that I wasn't accepting the narrative they'd constructed, that I had evidence, that I was willing to fight." "Of course," I said, standing. "I'll send everything by end of day." As I walked out of that conference room, I felt eyes on my back. Daniel Whitmore was watching me, and I'd just become something more dangerous than an annoying junior analyst with questions. I'd become a threat. The email to HR took me 3 hours to compose. Every word needed to be precise, professional, irrefutable. I attached screenshots of the file modification logs, the original documents I'd saved to my personal cloud storage, and a detailed timeline showing exactly when changes occurred. By the time I hit send at 4:47 p.m., my shoulders ached from tension, and my eyes burned from staring at the screen. I was packing, up for the day when my phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number as that morning. "There's a coffee shop 2 blocks west of the office. Brewed Awakening. I'll be there at 6 p.m. if you want to talk. No pressure. Marcus?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Meeting a stranger from IT to discuss what was clearly becoming a dangerous situation seemed like something the protagonist does in the first act before everything goes wrong. But I was already in the middle of everything going wrong. Maybe it was time to stop being careful. I texted back, "I'll be there." Brewed Awakening was the kind of place that Atlanta did well. Exposed brick, mismatched furniture, local art on the walls, and coffee that took itself seriously without being pretentious. The evening crowd was a mix of remote workers wrapping up their day and students from Georgia State sprawled with textbooks and laptops. I spotted him immediately, even though we'd never met. He sat in the back corner, face illuminated by his laptop screen, wearing a faded Howard University hoodie and wire-rimmed glasses. Black man, medium build, the kind of calm presence that made you feel like he'd thought through 17 possible scenarios before settling on the current one. He looked up as I approached, his expression cautious but kind. "Aaliyah?" "Marcus." I slid into the chair across from him. "Thank you for reaching out. That took courage. No more courage than what you did Thursday." I was in the background of that meeting doing tech support for the presentation system. I saw what happened. He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. I've been with Meridian for 6 years, long enough to know when something doesn't smell right. A barista appeared, and I ordered a chamomile tea, needing something to do with my hands. Marcus already had coffee, half finished and probably cold by now. "Why are you helping me?" I asked once we were alone again. "You don't know me. This could cost you your job too." He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. 2 years ago, I flagged some security vulnerabilities in our financial systems, holes big enough that someone with the right access could move money around without triggering standard protocols. I wrote a detailed report, submitted it to my supervisor, and copied Daniel Whitmore since it involved financial data integrity. Let me guess. Nothing happened. Worse than nothing. My supervisor told me I was overstepping my role, said the financial team had their own security measures, and IT shouldn't worry about things outside our domain. A month later, I was transferred to a different project. The vulnerabilities were never fixed. He paused. When I saw your presentation Thursday, when I saw those discrepancies you'd found, I recognized the pattern. Someone's been using those exact vulnerabilities I'd warned about. My tea arrived, and I wrapped my hands around the mug, absorbing this information. "So you think Daniel deliberately ignored your report because he was already using those security holes?" "I think it's a strong possibility, and I think when you started finding evidence of it, he decided you needed to be discredited before you could piece together what was really happening." "That's a serious accusation." "You made serious accusations in your presentation. Difference is yours were backed by data." Marcus pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. "I've been doing some digging since Thursday. Unofficial digging, off the clock. Using access I technically shouldn't use for personal investigation. But I found something you need to see." He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a complex network diagram showing data flows between different accounts and subsidiaries. Red lines highlighted certain transactions, the same patterns I'd identified in my research, but extended further back. 3 years of suspicious transfers, all following the same deliberately complex routing. "This is more than 2.7 million, I said, my throat tight. "Try 8.3 million. Your research only captured the last 18 months. This has been going on much longer." The number hit me like a physical thing. $8 million. Not a mistake. Not accounting errors. A systematic long-term fraud. "We need to take this to someone," I said. "The CEO, the board, someone above Daniel." Marcus shook his head slowly. "That's what my instinct says too. But think about it. Daniel's been CFO for 4 years. He reports directly to the CEO. They have lunch together twice a week. This kind of operation doesn't happen without either active approval or deliberate blindness from the top." "So what are you suggesting? That the entire leadership is corrupt?" "I'm suggesting we don't know who we can trust, and we need to be strategic about this." He pulled his phone back, swiping to another document. "I have something else. The night after your presentation, someone accessed the audit archive remotely. They pulled records from the last 3 years of external audits. Looking for what? My guess, seeing if any auditors had flagged similar concerns, checking whether there's already a trail they need to cover up. The access came from Daniel's login credentials, but it was at 2 a.m. on a Friday night. Could have been him, could have been someone using his credentials." I sipped my tea, my mind racing. "You're collecting evidence. Building a case." "We're collecting evidence," he corrected gently. "You're already in this, whether you want to be or not. After today's meeting with HR, after you submitted those logs, you painted a target on yourself. Question is, what do we do with what we know?" The weight of it settled over me. The realization that this wasn't just about my bruised ego or my professional reputation anymore. This was about $8 million stolen from a company, hidden through deliberate fraud, protected by someone with power and resources and motivation to keep it buried. And I was a 29-year-old junior analyst with 3 years of experience and a tendency to believe that truth and hard work would be enough. "I need to think," I said. "This is bigger than I realized." "Take your time, but not too much time. People who steal $8 million don't leave loose ends." Marcus's voice was soft, but serious. "I'm not trying to scare you, but you should know what you're dealing with." "I'm already scared," I admitted. "I've been scared since Thursday. But I'm also angry. And I'm tired of people like Daniel Whitmore getting away with things because people like us are too afraid to call them out." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. My grandmother used to clean offices in downtown Atlanta, worked nights for 40 years. She saw things, heard things, executives talking like the cleaning lady was invisible. She taught me that the people everyone ignores often see the most truth. We're not invisible, Aaliyah. We're just underestimated. My grandmother was a bookkeeper, I said. Never got promoted, even though she caught more errors than anyone else in her firm. She taught me that quiet doesn't mean powerless. We sat there for a moment. Two people who'd never met before Thursday, connected by grandmothers who'd taught us to see what others missed, and by a fraud that someone had assumed we'd be too intimidated to pursue. So what's our next move? I asked. Marcus pulled out a small USB drive from his pocket. This contains everything I've compiled. The security reports I filed 2 years ago. The transaction patterns I've mapped. The access logs showing file manipulations and after-hours data pulls. It's not enough for law enforcement yet, but it's enough to establish a pattern. Why are you giving this to me? Because you're the one who has the financial expertise to make sense of it all. And because if something happens to me, someone else needs to have this information. He slid the drive across the table. Keep it somewhere safe. Somewhere not connected to your work computer or your phone. Somewhere analog. I picked up the drive, its weight insignificant, but its implications enormous. You really think it could get that serious? That Daniel would try to hurt us? I think people who steal $8 million have already demonstrated a willingness to break rules. I don't know what else they're willing to do, and I'd rather we be paranoid and safe than trusting and sorry. My phone buzzed. An email notification from Patricia in HR. Aaliyah, thank you for your detailed submission this afternoon. We'll need to conduct a thorough investigation of your claims. In the meantime, we're placing you on paid administrative leave effective immediately while we review the situation. Please return your access badge and laptop to security by end of day tomorrow. We'll be in touch within 2 weeks with next steps. I showed Marcus the email. He read it, his jaw tightening. Administrative leave. Classic move. Removes you from the office. Limits your access to systems and people. Makes it harder for you to gather more evidence or build alliances. They're isolating me. They're trying to. But here's what they don't know. I'm still inside. I still have access. And I'm very good at seeing things people don't want me to see. He leaned forward. This is your decision, Aaliyah. You can take the administrative leave, wait for HR to complete whatever investigation they're planning, hope that someone in the company actually cares about truth and justice. That's the safe path. Or we go external. We compile everything into an airtight case and take it to an outside authority. Maybe the SEC, maybe law enforcement, maybe even an external audit firm. Force the issue from outside the system that's protecting Daniel. I thought about my apartment, my carefully built life, my career that I'd worked so hard for. I thought about Thursday's humiliation and today's meeting and the email currently glowing on my phone screen that was trying to silence me with corporate politeness. I thought about my grandmother, working 40 years at a firm that never valued her enough to promote her, and my mother's voice telling me that sometimes the right path is the one that scares you most. If we're going to do this, I said slowly, we need to do it right. We need evidence so solid that it can't be dismissed or explained away. We need to be smarter than they think we're capable of being. Marcus smiled, a small, determined expression. I was hoping you'd say that. I have a friend who works in forensic accounting. She owes me a favor. She might be willing to look at what we have, tell us what else we need to make this bulletproof. When can we meet her? I'll set something up. Probably this weekend, somewhere neutral. He stood, extending his hand. Welcome to the resistance, Aaliyah. Population. 2 very stubborn people with a dangerous amount of information. I shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip, the solidarity in that simple gesture. For the first time since Thursday, I didn't feel alone. Walking home that evening, I kept the USB drive clutched in my hand, hyper-aware of its presence. The October air had cooled, and the city lights were beginning to glow against the darkening sky. I passed people heading to dinner, to bars, to whatever normal Tuesday evening plans they had, their lives continuing in blessed ignorance of corporate fraud and career implosion. At home, I stood in my living room for a long moment, turning the USB drive over in my fingers. Where do you hide evidence when you're not sure who might come looking for it? My eyes landed on my grandmother's quilt draped over the couch. She'd made it herself, hand-stitching each square over the course of 2 years. My mother had given it to me when I'd moved to Atlanta, a piece of family history to keep me grounded. I walked to my bookshelf and pulled out a heavy hardcover, a financial analysis textbook from my undergraduate years. I slipped the USB drive between pages 347 and 348 in a chapter about fraud detection and forensic accounting. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then I took out my journal, actual paper, actual pen, no digital trail, and began writing everything that had happened. Every conversation, every discovery, every decision. If Marcus was right about the danger, someone needed to have a record. Someone needed to know the truth. My phone buzzed again. A text from my mother. Just checking in, baby. You sounded stressed on Sunday. Everything okay? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Getting there, Mama. Love you. It wasn't a lie exactly. I was getting there. Getting to a place where I understood what I was dealing with. Getting to a place where I knew what I had to do, even if the knowing terrified me. Outside my window, Atlanta hummed with its usual Tuesday night energy. Tomorrow I'd return my badge and laptop. Tomorrow I'd officially be on administrative leave, cut off from the office and the resources I needed. But tonight, I had evidence. I had an ally, and I had something Daniel Whitmore had underestimated. The absolute refusal to stay quiet when staying quiet meant letting lies win. I looked at the USB drive, hidden in plain sight among my books, and I made myself a promise. This story was going to have an ending that would make my grandmother proud. Wednesday morning felt surreal. For the first time in 3 years, I woke up without the immediate anxiety of rushing to the office. No morning routine timed to the minute, no coffee grabbed on the walk, no elevator ride rehearsing the day's priorities. Just silence and the weight of knowing I had to return my badge and laptop by end of day. I took my time. Made breakfast, actual breakfast. Not a protein bar eaten while checking emails. Scrambled eggs with cheese, toast, fresh fruit. I sat at my small dining table and ate slowly, watching morning light filter through my plants, trying to convince myself this administrative leave was an opportunity rather than a punishment. It didn't work. My stomach churned with each bite. By 10 a.m., I'd showered, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, a deliberate choice to not wear work clothes for this non-work errand, and caught the bus downtown. The office building looked different in mid-morning light, less imposing somehow, or maybe I was just seeing it through different eyes. The eyes of someone on the outside now. Security was handled by Jerome, thankfully. He processed my badge return with gentle efficiency, not asking questions, but his eyes were kind. "You take care of yourself, Ms. Brooks," he said as he handed me the receipt. "You too, Jerome. Tell your grandson I said good luck with baseball." The IT department was on the 38th floor. I'd only been there twice before, both times to pick up equipment. It was a different world from the finance floors. Darker, quieter, screens glowing everywhere like some kind of digital cave system. I found the help desk and explained I needed to return my laptop. The technician, a young South Asian guy with spectacular hair and tired eyes, took my computer without much interest. "Any personal files you need to recover?" "Already backed everything up," I lied. The truth was, I'd been too afraid to transfer anything suspicious-looking to personal storage. If they were watching, and I had to assume they were, any large file transfers in my final days would be flagged. "Cool. Sign here." He slid a form across the counter. As I was signing, I felt a presence beside me, Marcus, appearing as if summoned, holding what looked like a broken keyboard. "Hey, Brandon. This thing finally died on me. Can I get a replacement?" Marcus's voice was casual, unremarkable. Brandon sighed. "Dude, that's like the third one this year. What are you doing to these keyboards?" I type with passion. Marcus grinned, then glanced at me as if just noticing my presence. "Oh, hey, Aaliyah, right? From finance?" The performance was smooth. If I hadn't known better, I'd have believed this was a chance encounter. "Yeah, just returning equipment." I kept my voice neutral, playing along, Administrative leave, huh? That sucks. Marcus shook his head sympathetically. Well, hang in there. As Brandon turned to grab a new keyboard from the storage room, Marcus leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Saturday, 3 p.m., Piedmont Park, near the dog park entrance. My friend will be there. Tall black woman, purple jacket. She'll be holding a copy of The Warmth of Other Suns. Don't approach directly. Sit on the bench nearby, she'll initiate. I nodded imperceptibly, then spoke at normal volume. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Brandon returned with the keyboard, and I left, my heart pounding from the covert exchange. This was really happening. We were really doing this, operating like spies in our own city, planning secret meetings, using signals from Cold War novels. The thought should have felt dramatic, maybe even silly. Instead, it felt necessary. The rest of Wednesday disappeared into a haze of nervous energy. I cleaned my apartment, rearranged my bookshelves, repotted plants that didn't need repotting, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spiraling into the dozens of ways this could go wrong. Thursday brought rain, that heavy October rain that turns Atlanta's streets into rivers and makes everyone drive like they've never seen water before. I stayed inside, working through my personal copies of the financial data, creating new spreadsheets, looking for patterns I might have missed. The deeper I looked, the more sophisticated the scheme appeared. Money moving through shell companies with addresses that matched empty lots or UPS stores. Invoices for services that seemed plausible, until you noticed the same vendor billing for wildly different things. Sometimes IT support, sometimes consulting, sometimes maintenance services. Whoever designed this knew exactly what auditors looked for and had built the fraud to hide in the noise of legitimate business expenses. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Patricia from HR. Aaliyah, I wanted to update you on the investigation process. We've reviewed the documentation you submitted, and we're bringing in an external IT consultant to verify the file modification claims. When will that happen? They'll need about a week to conduct their analysis. In the meantime, I want to be clear that your administrative leave is procedural, not punitive. You'll continue receiving full salary and benefits. I appreciate that. I kept my voice professional, even as my mind raced. An external IT consultant meant they were taking my claims seriously, or they were building their own paper trail to justify whatever action they'd already decided to take. We'll be in touch as soon as we have findings. Please make sure you remain available for follow-up questions. After she hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. A week. 7 days before they'd have their findings. 7 days before whatever narrative they were constructing would be set in stone. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The morning arrived with clear skies, the storm system having passed through overnight. I dressed carefully, running clothes like I was just out for exercise. I pulled my hair into a high ponytail and grabbed my running shoes. The USB drive was tucked into a small zippered pocket in my jacket, a tiny weight that felt enormous. Piedmont Park on a Saturday afternoon was exactly as crowded as I'd hoped. Hundreds of people walking dogs, having picnics, jogging, living their normal Atlanta weekends. Perfect camouflage for a clandestine meeting. I found the dog park entrance at 2:53 p.m. The bench Marcus had described was occupied by an elderly man feeding pigeons, so I stretched nearby, doing the awkward pre-run stretches of someone who was definitely not a serious runner. At 2:58, the man gathered his breadcrumbs and shuffled off. I sat, pulling out my phone and pretending to check messages. At exactly 3 p.m., a tall black woman in a purple North Face jacket walked up, holding a worn paperback copy of Isabel Wilkerson's masterpiece. She sat on the other end of the bench, not looking at me. "Beautiful day," she said, her voice low and melodious. "Best time of year in Atlanta," I responded. The agreed-upon exchange Marcus had texted me that morning. "I'm Dr. Simone Wallace, forensic accountant, formerly with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, currently private practice." She still didn't look directly at me, her eyes on the dogs playing behind the fence. "Marcus says you found something interesting." $8.3 million worth of interesting, spanning 3 years. That got her attention. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, assessing. That's not interesting. That's career ending for someone, possibly criminal charges. You understand what you're getting into? I'm already in it. Someone made sure of that when they altered my files and humiliated me in front of the entire leadership team. Simone was quiet for a moment. Marcus mentioned you were on administrative leave. That's not a good sign. It means they're circling the wagons, deciding how to contain you. So I've been told. What do you want from me? I want to know if what I have is enough. Enough to take to authorities. Enough to force a real investigation. Enough to make sure this doesn't just disappear when they decide the easiest solution is to fire me and bury everything. Simone opened her book, pulling out what looked like a bookmark, but was actually a business card. She set it on the bench between us. My office is in Buckhead. Come Monday morning, 9 a.m. Bring everything, digital and physical. I'll review it properly, tell you what you have and what you need. But I need you to understand something first. She finally turned to look at me directly. She was probably in her mid-40s, with natural hair and elegant locks, and eyes that had clearly seen every kind of financial crime humans could devise. If what you're describing is accurate, you're not dealing with simple embezzlement. You're dealing with someone sophisticated enough to hide $8 million for 3 years through legitimate-looking channels. That person has resources, connections, and a lot to lose. When Marcus first called me, I almost said no, because I don't like putting civilians in danger. But you're here. I'm here because Marcus also told me about your grandmother, the bookkeeper who never got promoted but caught more errors than anyone. I had a grandmother like that too. Worked as a maid for a bank executive, overheard enough to know he was running a scam, reported it, got fired for her trouble. 3 years later, that executive went to prison, but my grandmother never got her job back. Simone's voice was steady, but something flickered in her expression. So I'm here because I don't like unfinished business, and I don't like powerful people who think they can silence people like us. I picked up the business card, palming it smoothly. Monday at 9. One more thing. Simone stood, stretching as if preparing to continue her walk. Don't tell anyone else about our meeting. Not friends, not family, not other coworkers who seem sympathetic. The fewer people who know what you're doing, the harder it is for information to get back to the wrong ears. Marcus, I trust. You, I'm choosing to trust. Everyone else is a potential leak until proven otherwise. Even HR? Even the external IT consultant they're bringing in? Especially them. HR protects the company, not employees. And an external consultant hired by the company is being paid by people who might not want certain things found. She smiled slightly. You seem surprised. You work in finance. You should understand incentive structures. She was right. Of course she was right. I'd been naive to think HR's investigation would be neutral. They weren't looking for truth. They were looking for the least damaging resolution to corporate exposure. Simone walked away, just another park visitor on a Saturday afternoon. I sat on the bench for another 10 minutes, then jogged slowly around the park's perimeter, my mind racing faster than my feet. When I got home, I showered and then stood in front of my bookshelf, retrieving the USB drive from its hiding place. I'd given this to Marcus to give to Simone's expert analysis. On Monday, a stranger would examine evidence of fraud that had already cost me my professional standing and might cost me much more. I thought about calling my mother. Thought about telling her everything, getting her advice, hearing her voice remind me that I came from a long line of women who did hard things. But Simone's warning echoed. The fewer people who know, the safer everyone is. Instead, I made tea and sat at my dining table with my paper journal, writing down everything that had happened. If something went wrong, if this all blew up in a way I couldn't control, at least there would be a record. At least someone would know I hadn't been crazy or incompetent or wrong. I'd been right. I'd been so right that someone with power and money and motivation had decided I needed to be destroyed. Sunday was harder. The waiting felt physical, a weight pressing on my chest. I went to church, something I'd been doing less frequently since moving to Atlanta, caught up in work and ambition and the busyness of building a career. But today, I needed the ritual, the community, the reminder that I was part of something larger than myself. The pastor preached about Daniel in the lion's den, about faith in the face of certain destruction. I'd heard the story dozens of times since childhood, but today it felt personal. Daniel, thrown into danger because he refused to compromise his integrity. Daniel, surviving because he trusted something larger than his fear. I wasn't particularly religious. My faith was more cultural than devotional, more about community than divine intervention. But sitting in that pew, surrounded by voices raised in song, I felt something shift. Not confidence exactly, more like resolve. Whatever happened Monday, whatever Simone found in the evidence, whatever response came from Meridian Financial Group, I would face it standing up. I would face it the way my grandmother had faced 40 years of being underestimated, the way my mother had faced single parenthood and graduate, school and building a life from pieces that seemed too broken to fit. Together, I would face it like Aaliyah Brooks, the woman who saw $8 million worth of fraud and refused to unsee it, no matter the cost. That evening, I laid out clothes for Monday like it was armor for battle. Professional but not corporate. Nice pants, a silk blouse, my grandmother's pearls. I looked at myself in the mirror, practicing the expression I'd wear. Calm, prepared, unbreakable. The woman looking back at me was scared, but she was also done being quiet. Monday morning, I caught the train to Buckhead, the USB drive in my purse feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Simone's office was in a nondescript building. No fancy lobby, no corporate branding, just a directory listing Wallace & Associates, Suite 412. The elevator rose slowly, each floor a held breath. When the doors opened, I stepped into a small waiting area with practical furniture and walls covered in framed certifications and degrees. A young receptionist looked up. "You must be Aaliyah. Dr. Wallace is expecting you." Simone's office was organized chaos, file boxes stacked strategically, whiteboards covered in flowcharts and numbers, 3 monitors on her desk displaying different spreadsheets. She looked up when I entered, gesturing to a chair. "You brought everything?" I handed over the USB drive. 3 years of transaction records, modification logs, original research files, timeline documentation. Everything Marcus and I compiled. Simone plugged the drive into her computer, her expression neutral as she began clicking through files. The silence stretched. I watched her face for reactions, but she'd clearly perfected the poker face necessary for this kind of work. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, she sat back. "Okay, let's talk about what you've actually found here." My heart hammered. "Is it enough?" "It's a start, but it's also not what you think it is." Simone turned one of her monitors toward me, showing a complex flowchart she'd apparently created on the fly. "The $8 million? That's not the crime. That's the evidence of the crime. The actual offense is wire fraud, falsification of corporate records, possibly securities fraud if any of this impacted stock prices or investor decisions. What you've documented is systematic financial manipulation over 3 years. So it is enough? For law enforcement to open an investigation? Yes, for criminal charges? Maybe, if they can prove intent and trace the money to its ultimate destination. But here's what concerns me." She pulled up another file. "These transactions are sophisticated. Multiple layers, international components, timing that suggests someone with deep knowledge of audit cycles and regulatory thresholds. This isn't your CFO acting alone." My stomach dropped. "You think there are others involved?" "I think your CFO is either the mastermind of a very clever scheme, or he's a very well-paid participant in someone else's operation. Either way, when you expose this, you're not just threatening one person's career. You're threatening an entire network." She let that sink in before continuing. "Which brings me to the most important question. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Because once we take this external, and I do mean external, we're talking SEC, FBI, maybe even the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, there's no taking it back. Your name will be attached to this. You'll be a whistleblower, with all the protection and all the consequences that label carries." I thought about Thursday's meeting, Daniel's practice dismissal, the colleagues who'd looked away. I thought about my grandmother and my mother and every woman who'd been told to be quiet for her own good. "I'm sure," I said. "What do we do next?" Simone smiled, a small, fierce expression that reminded me why Marcus had called her first. "Next, we build a case so airtight that they can't ignore it, explain it away, or bury it. We make you untouchable by making the truth undeniable. She pulled out a legal pad and began writing. First, we need to secure these records legally. File a formal complaint with the SEC through their whistleblower program that gives you legal protection and starts an official investigation. Second, we need to trace where that money actually went. That requires subpoena power, which means we need law enforcement involved. Third, we document everything about your retaliation, the altered files, the public humiliation, the administrative leave. That establishes a pattern of obstruction. How long will all this take? Months, maybe longer. These investigations move slowly. Meanwhile, you're stuck in limbo. No job. No income beyond whatever severance or unemployment you can get. And a target on your back from people who've already demonstrated willingness to destroy your credibility. So I'm trapped. Either accept defeat or commit to a fight that could ruin me financially and professionally. Yes, Simone said simply. That's exactly where you are. And I'm sorry because it's not fair. But it is the reality of being a whistleblower. The system isn't designed to protect people like you. It's designed to protect itself. I sat with that truth, feeling its weight. Then I thought about $8 million stolen over 3 years, hidden in plain sight because people like me were supposed to be too intimidated to ask questions. File the complaint, I said. Start the investigation. I didn't come this far to back down now. Simone nodded, respect flickering in her expression. Then let's get to work. We've got a lot to do, and the clock's already running. The SEC complaint took 3 days to file properly. 3 days of Simone and me sitting in her office, going through every document, every transaction, every piece of evidence with the kind of scrutiny that made my original research look casual. She had a framework, a methodology honed by years with the FBI, and she was relentless. This vendor invoice, do you have the original purchase order that authorized it? The wire transfer on March 15th. What was the business justification documented in the approval chain? This subsidiary account in Delaware. When was it established and who are the registered officers? Questions I hadn't thought to ask. Gaps in my evidence that we needed to fill or at least acknowledge. By Wednesday afternoon, my eyes burned from screen time and my brain felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. You're doing good work, Simone said, noticing my fatigue. Most people who walk into my office have passion but no structure. You've got both. That's rare. Doesn't feel rare. Feels like I'm drowning in details and still missing half of what I need to see. That's how you know you're being thorough. She saved the document we'd been working on. We're ready. I'm filing this tonight through the SEC's whistleblower portal. Once it's submitted, there's no taking it back. I know. Do you? Simone turned to face me fully. Because once this hits the SEC's system, your name is attached to an official fraud allegation against a publicly traded company. Meridian's stock could take a hit. People could lose jobs. Investors could sue. And all of that will be traced back to you. You need to be prepared for that. I thought about Jennifer and her coffee, apologizing for not defending me because she was up for promotion. I thought about the dozens of other employees at Meridian who'd built their careers there, who had families to support, mortgages to pay. Good people who'd done nothing wrong except work for a company with a corrupt CFO. I'm not trying to hurt innocent people, I said quietly, but I can't protect them by staying silent about theft either. If Meridian takes a hit, that's on Daniel Whitmore and whoever else is involved in this. Not on me. Good answer. Because that's exactly what you'll need to. Remember when the lawyers start calling and the media starts digging and everyone wants to paint you as either a hero or a villain? Simone pulled up the completed complaint on her screen. Last chance. Are you certain? File it. She clicked submit. The screen processed for a moment, then displayed a confirmation. Your submission has been received. Confirmation number, SEC 2024 WB 087453. Just like that, I was officially a whistleblower. Now we wait, Simone said. The SEC will assign investigators, probably within a week. They'll want to interview you, verify your evidence, potentially issue subpoenas to Meridian. Meanwhile, you should prepare for Meridian to escalate their response. What do you mean? Right now, they think they're dealing with a disgruntled employee who made some accusations. Once the SEC gets involved, they'll realize this is bigger. They'll lawyer up. They might try to discredit you more aggressively, or they might try to settle quietly. Either way, things are about to get more intense. She was right. Though I didn't realize how right until Friday afternoon. I was at home, trying to focus on a novel I'd been meaning to read for months, when my phone rang. Unknown number, but I'd learned to answer everything since filing the complaint. "Is this Aaliyah Brooks?" A woman's voice, professional but strained. "Yes, who's calling?" "This is Jennifer Chen. We worked together, at Meridian." Her voice dropped lower. "I need to talk to you. Can we meet? Somewhere not near the office?" My first instinct was suspicion. Simone's warning echoed. Everyone's a potential leak. But Jennifer sounded genuinely distressed, not calculating. "Why?" I asked carefully. "Because I think I'm next. Daniel called me into his office today, started asking questions about my relationship with you, whether we'd talked since your administrative leave, whether I knew anything about external communications you might be having." "Aaliyah, he's paranoid. Something's happening." My pulse quickened. "What did you tell him?" "That we barely knew each other outside of work. That I hadn't spoken to you since you left. But he didn't believe me. Or he's just scared enough to not trust anyone." She paused. "There's something else." After the meeting, I went back to my desk and found that my system access had been restricted. "I can't open any files related to the subsidiaries you were researching. Someone locked me out." "Jennifer, I know you filed something. I don't know what or with who, but Daniel is acting like someone who knows the walls are closing in. And I think he's trying to figure out who else might be involved, who else might know something." Her voice cracked slightly. "I have a daughter, Aaliyah. I can't lose this job, but I also can't keep working somewhere that's clearly corrupt. I just need to know what's happening." I closed my eyes, weighing options. Simone had been clear, trust no one. But Jennifer was scared, and if Daniel was starting to restrict access and interrogate employees, that meant the pressure was building exactly as Simone had predicted. "Sweetwater coffee. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone," she agreed and hung up. I immediately called Simone. "Probably a bad idea to meet her," Simone said after I explained. "Could be genuine, could be she's being used to gather information about your plans. But if she's genuine, she could be a corroborating witness. Someone else inside who can verify the culture of intimidation. Or she could be wearing a wire." The paranoia was suffocating but also necessary. "So what do I do?" "Meet her in a public place like you planned. Don't tell her anything about the SEC complaint. That's confidential by law anyway. Just listen. If she offers information voluntarily, that's different from you soliciting it. And Aaliyah, record the conversation on your phone, legal in Georgia with one-party consent. If this goes sideways, you'll want documentation." Saturday morning arrived gray and cool, autumn finally asserting itself. Sweetwater Coffee was busy with the weekend brunch crowd, which provided cover and witnesses, exactly what I needed. I arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table with clear sightlines to the door, and set my phone to record in my jacket pocket. Jennifer arrived at 10:03, looking nothing like the polished professional I'd known at Meridian. No makeup, hair in a messy ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized Georgia Tech sweatshirt. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." "You sounded desperate." "I am desperate. Aaliyah, I need you to understand something first. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't defend you in that meeting. I'm sorry I prioritized my promotion over doing what was right. I've been thinking about it constantly since Thursday, and I hate myself for being such a coward." The apology caught me off guard. I'd expected defensiveness or manipulation, not genuine remorse. "What changed?" I asked. "I got curious. After they put you on leave, after Daniel started acting weird, I decided to look at some of those subsidiaries you'd mentioned in your presentation. I couldn't access most of the files, but I found an old audit report from 2 years ago. It had been flagged for follow-up on some of the same vendor relationships you'd questioned. The follow-up never happened." She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. "This is from the internal audit department's tracking system. Someone marked the follow-up as resolved, but there's no documentation of resolution. It just disappeared." I studied the screenshot. It corroborated what Marcus and I had found. A pattern of concerns being raised and then quietly buried. Who marked it as resolved? That's the thing. The system shows it was closed by someone in the CFO's office, but it doesn't specify who. Could be Daniel, could be one of his senior analysts, could be his executive assistant. The audit trail is deliberately vague. Why are you showing me this? Jennifer looked at me directly, her eyes tired but determined. Because you were right. Because I want to help fix this if it's not too late. And because I'm terrified that if this company is doing something illegal, I'm going to get swept up in it just by association. I need to protect myself and my daughter. I can't tell you what to do, Jennifer. I can't involve you in anything I might or might not be doing regarding Meridian. I know. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking if there's a way for me to come forward with what I know without destroying my entire life. Is there, a safe way to be a witness or something? This was the moment Simone had warned me about. The moment when someone else wanted in, wanted to help, wanted to be on the right side. And I had no way of knowing if it was genuine or a trap. If someone, hypothetically, wanted to report corporate misconduct, there are formal channels, whistleblower protections through the SEC, anonymous hotlines, that kind of thing. But I'm not a lawyer. I can't give you advice on what to do. But you did something, didn't you? That's why Daniel is panicking. I stayed quiet. Let her draw her own conclusions. Jennifer nodded slowly. Okay, I get it. You can't say anything. That's fine. But if investigators start asking questions, if this becomes an official thing, I want you to know that I'll tell the truth about what I've seen, about the intimidation, the culture of silence, the way Daniel operates. I owe you that much. You don't owe me anything, Jennifer. But if you're going to do the right thing, do it for yourself, not for me. We talked for another 20 minutes, carefully skirting around specifics. But the subtext was clear. Jennifer had decided to stop being complicit. Whether that decision would hold when things got harder remained to be seen, but at least she was wrestling with her conscience. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for a while longer, processing. The ecosystem around the fraud was starting to crack. Daniel's paranoia was making people nervous, and nervous people made mistakes or decided to jump ship before the whole thing sank. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Can you talk? Something happened. I called immediately. What's wrong? I got pulled into a meeting yesterday afternoon. HR and Daniel's assistant. They wanted to know about my system access protocols, whether I'd noticed any unusual activity on the network, whether anyone had asked me to pull data they shouldn't have access to. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. Aaliyah, they're looking for the leak. They know someone helped you, and they're trying to figure out who. What did you say? I played dumb. Talked about standard security protocols and routine access logs. But they're not done. They mentioned bringing in an external cybersecurity firm to audit the IT department's activities over the past 3 months. If they do that, they'll find traces of my searches, the files I pulled, the data I compiled. My chest tightened. Can you cover your tracks? Some of it, but not all. IT system logs are designed to be tamper-proof for exactly this reason. I can obscure some access patterns, but a dedicated forensic audit will find something. It's just a matter of time. What do you want to do? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I want to finish what we started, but I also need to protect myself. If they're bringing in external auditors for IT, that means they're willing to spend serious money to find out who's been helping you. That level of investment suggests they're more scared than I thought. Simone says that's actually good news. Scared people make mistakes. Scared people also get aggressive. We need to be ready for whatever's coming. He was right. The complaint had been filed Wednesday. It was now Saturday. In just 3 days, the pressure had increased exponentially. Jennifer reaching out, Daniel interrogating employees, plans for cybersecurity audits. The machine was fighting back. Sunday, I went to church again. Same pastor, different sermon. This time about Esther, the woman who risked everything to save her people. For such a time as this, the pastor intoned. Sometimes we're placed in impossible positions, not as punishment, but as purpose. I wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe there was meaning in the chaos I'd unleashed. But mostly I just felt tired and scared and uncertain about whether I'd made the right choice. Monday morning, Simone called. The SEC has assigned a lead investigator to your complaint. Her name is Agent Rachel Morrison, White Collar Crimes Division. She wants to meet with you this week for a formal interview. This is good. It means they're taking it seriously enough to move quickly. How quickly? Morrison's calendar shows she's clearing time for this, which suggests it's a priority case. Probably because of the dollar amounts involved, and the fact that Meridian is publicly traded. But here's the thing you need to understand. Once you give that formal interview, the SEC can issue subpoenas to Meridian. That means Meridian will know officially that there's an active investigation. Right now, they probably suspect, but they don't know for certain. After your interview, they'll know. And then they have to decide, cooperate with the investigation or fight it. Either way, your name will almost certainly come out. The company has a right to know the source of the allegations they're defending against. Whistleblower protections will help, but they won't make you anonymous. My name, out there, attached forever to this moment, this choice, this fight. When does Morrison want to meet? Thursday at 10 a.m., Federal Building downtown. You'll give a sworn statement, answer questions, provide all your evidence officially. Bring everything, the documents, the timeline, the modification logs, all of it. This is where it becomes real, Aaliyah. This is where you become officially untouchable, but also officially the person who brought down a major financial firm. You say that like it's certain we'll win? Nothing's certain. But if Morrison is moving this fast, she thinks she has something worth pursuing. That's more than most whistleblowers get. I spent the next 3 days preparing. Simone drilled me on potential questions, taught me how to answer clearly without speculation, how to stick to provable facts even when I wanted to editorialize. Marcus sent me encouraging texts, updates about the growing paranoia at Meridian, reports that the external cybersecurity audit had been scheduled for the following week. Everything was accelerating, converging toward Thursday's interview, like a train that couldn't be stopped even if I wanted to stop it. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed watching shadows move across my ceiling, thinking about my grandmother, about 40 years of being overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, about finding errors that saved her company hundreds of thousands of dollars and never getting a promotion, about dying quietly with her competence unrecognized except by family who knew her worth. She'd accepted that silence, had made peace with being invisible. I couldn't. Wouldn't. Not anymore. Thursday morning, I dressed in the same outfit I'd worn to Simone's office. Professional, serious, unbreakable. My grandmother's pearls at my throat like a talisman. I took the train downtown to the Federal Building, passed through security, and was escorted to a conference room where Agent Rachel Morrison waited. She was younger than I expected, maybe late 30s. Blonde hair pulled back severely, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. She stood when I entered, extending her hand. Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming in. I'm Agent Morrison, SEC Enforcement Division. I've reviewed your complaint and supporting documentation. I have to say, this is one of the most thoroughly prepared whistleblower submissions I've seen. I had help from Dr. Simone Wallace. I know. Simone's good. She wouldn't have brought this to us if she didn't think it was solid. Morrison gestured to a chair. Let's get started. This interview will be recorded and transcribed. Everything you say is under oath. Do you understand? Yes. For the next 4 hours, I walked Agent Morrison through every detail. Every transaction, every discrepancy, every alteration to my files, every intimidation tactic. She asked sharp questions, probing for holes in my knowledge or inconsistencies in my account. She was thorough, skeptical, and exactly what I needed. Someone who wouldn't take anything at face value. When we finally finished, she sat back and regarded me for a long moment. Ms. Brooks, based on this interview and the evidence you've provided, I'm going to recommend that we open a formal investigation into Meridian Financial Group and issue subpoenas for their financial records. I want you to understand what that means. This company will know they're under federal investigation. They'll hire expensive lawyers. They'll likely try to determine who initiated the complaint. Your life is about to get very complicated. I understand. Do you? Because I've worked with a lot of whistleblowers. Some handle the pressure, some don't. The ones who survive are the ones who know their why. Why are you doing this, Ms. Brooks? Is it revenge? Justice? Ego? I thought about that question. Really thought about it. My grandmother worked for 40 years as a bookkeeper and never got promoted, even though she was the best they had. My mother raised me alone and built a career everyone said was impossible. I got to where I am because women before me refused to accept that competence wasn't enough. I met Morrison's eyes. I'm doing this because $8 million was stolen, and I'm tired of powerful people getting away with things because they assume people like me are too scared to speak up. I'm doing this because someone has to, and it might as well be me. Morrison smiled. Small, but genuine. Good answer. That's the kind of why that doesn't crack under pressure. She stood, gathering her files. We'll be in touch within the week with next steps. In the meantime, document everything. Every phone call from Meridian, every email, every interaction. If they retaliate further, I want to know immediately. Thank you, Agent Morrison. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when this is over and justice has been served. Until then, just stay safe, Ms. Brooks. You're doing something brave and important. Make sure you live to see it through. I left the federal building feeling simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter because I'd done it. I'd given my sworn testimony to a federal agent who believed me. Heavier because now there was no going back. The machinery of justice was in motion, and I was strapped to the front of it, unable to get off even if I wanted to. My phone rang as I was walking to the train. Unknown number. Aaliyah Brooks? A man's voice, professional but cold. Yes? This is Gerald Hutchins, General Counsel for Meridian Financial Group. We need to talk about your administrative leave and some allegations that have come to our attention. Can you come to the office tomorrow morning? The investigation had been open for exactly 4 hours. Someone at the SEC had already leaked or Meridian had found out another way. Either way, they knew. I'll need to consult with my attorney before agreeing to any meetings. Your attorney? He sounded amused. Ms. Brooks, you're an employee on administrative leave. You don't need an attorney to have a conversation with your employer. Nevertheless, I'll be consulting with legal counsel. If you'd like to send me a formal meeting request via email, I'll respond within 48 hours. I hung up before he could reply. My hands were shaking. This was it. The fight was no longer theoretical or hypothetical. It was happening, right now, and I'd just drawn a line I couldn't uncross. I called Simone immediately. They already know, I said when she answered. Meridian's lawyer called. They want to meet. Don't. Absolutely do not meet with them without representation. I'll refer you to an employment attorney I know who specializes in whistleblower cases. Her name is Diana Okonkwo. She's brilliant. I'll make an introduction today. Simone, this is moving so fast. That's because you hit something big, and they're panicking. Panic is good. Panic makes people sloppy. Just remember, you're protected now. The SEC knows everything. You've got federal whistleblower status. They can't touch you without massive legal consequences. That doesn't make me feel safer. It's not supposed to make you feel safe. It's supposed to make you dangerous. And right now, Aaliyah, you're the most dangerous person in that company's orbit. That's exactly where you need to be. After we hung up, I stood on the platform waiting for the train, watching professionals rush past in their workday urgency, and I thought about danger and power, and the strange mathematics of speaking truth in a system designed to protect lies. I'd spent 3 years trying to belong in corporate Atlanta, trying to prove I deserved my seat at the table. Now I'd flipped the table, and there was no putting it back. Diana Okonkwo's office was nothing like Simone's organized chaos. It was pristine, deliberate, powerful. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Midtown, modern art that probably cost more than my annual salary, furniture that whispered expensive minimalism. Diana herself matched the aesthetic. Nigerian-American, late 40s, wearing a cream suit that probably had its own insurance policy, natural hair and an elegant updo, and an expression that suggested she'd litigated cases that would make grown men weep. Simone speaks highly of you, Diana said, gesturing to a leather chair across from her desk. Says you're thorough, brave, and about to need serious legal protection. Let's talk about what that means. I handed her copies of everything. The SEC complaint, Morrison's contact information, the timeline of events, the call from Meridian's general counsel. Diana reviewed the materials with the kind of focus that made me understand why her hourly rate was probably astronomical. After 20 minutes, she looked up. You've built an impressive case, but you've also painted an enormous target on yourself. Meridian will come at you from every angle. They'll question your competence, your motives, your mental state if they think they can make it stick. They'll try to find anything in your employment history they can weaponize. Have you ever been late to work? Called in sick when you weren't? Used company resources for personal business? They'll comb through everything. I've been a model employee. Good, because the best defense against a smear campaign is a spotless record. Diana pulled up a document on her computer. Here's what we're going to do. First, I'm sending a letter to Meridian's counsel establishing representation and making clear that all communication goes through me. No more direct contact. Second, we're going to document every single interaction. Calls, emails, even sideways glances if you happen to see anyone from Meridian in public. Third, we're preparing for them to terminate your employment. They're going to fire me? Almost certainly. They'll dress it up as restructuring or performance-based or mutual agreement. But yes, the question is whether we can prove it's retaliation, which would violate federal whistleblower protections. If we can establish a clear pattern of retaliation, you're entitled to reinstatement, back pay, and damages. I don't want reinstatement. I don't want to work for people who did this. Diana smiled slightly. Most of my clients say that eventually, but legally we need to preserve that option. It gives us leverage in settlement negotiations. Settlement? I don't want their money. I want them held accountable. And the SEC investigation will handle accountability. We're talking about protecting you financially and professionally. Unless you have substantial savings, you'll need income. Whistleblower cases take months, sometimes years. The SEC might eventually award you a percentage of recovered funds, but that's not guaranteed and it's not immediate. Meanwhile, you have rent, bills, life. A settlement would provide stability while you figure out what comes next. The practicality of it hit me like cold water. I'd been so focused on justice and truth that I hadn't fully processed the economic reality. My savings would cover maybe 3 months of expenses. After that, I'd be hemorrhaging money while waiting for federal investigations to slowly grind forward. How much do your services cost? I asked quietly. For whistleblower cases, I work on contingency. If we settle or win damages, I take a percentage. If we lose, you don't pay. Simone vouched for you, and I trust her judgment. Plus, I don't like corporate fraud, and I really don't like companies that punish people for exposing it. Diana's expression was fierce. So let's make sure they regret ever thinking they could silence you. Over the next week, things accelerated with the inevitability of an avalanche. Diana sent her representation letter Monday afternoon. By Tuesday morning, Meridian responded with a formal termination letter, citing violation of confidentiality agreements and unauthorized disclosure of proprietary information. Diana had predicted it, but seeing the words still felt like a punch. 3 years of work, 3 years of building my career, ended with corporate legalese and a severance package contingent on signing an NDA that would prevent me from ever speaking about Meridian again. Don't sign it, Diana instructed. That NDA is designed to silence you. Once you sign, you're legally prohibited from cooperating with investigations or speaking publicly. They're hoping you'll prioritize short-term money over long-term justice. The severance is 3 months' salary, and your whistleblower award, if the SEC recovers funds, could be substantially more. Plus, we're going to sue for wrongful termination. This letter practically admits retaliation. They're citing confidentiality violations that were actually protected disclosures to federal authorities. It's textbook illegal retaliation. While Diana prepared our legal response, the pressure intensified from other directions. My LinkedIn profile suddenly showed multiple views from law firms and corporate investigation companies, clearly people researching me on Meridian's behalf. I got 3 calls from numbers that hung up when I answered. A reporter from the Atlanta Business Chronicle left a voicemail asking to discuss recent developments at Meridian Financial Group. The story was leaking, becoming public. Marcus texted Tuesday evening, "The cybersecurity audit started today. They're imaging hard drives and pulling server logs. I've been told not to access any systems until the audit is complete. Aaliyah, they're going to find what I did. It's only a matter of time." I called him immediately. "What do you need?" "A lawyer, probably. And maybe a miracle." He laughed, but it sounded strained. I knew this was possible. I accepted the risk, but now that it's happening, I'm realizing I might lose everything. My job, my reputation, maybe face charges for unauthorized system access. Diana represents whistleblowers. Let me ask if she can help you too. I'm not technically a whistleblower. I just helped you access information. You exposed security vulnerabilities that were being exploited for fraud. That makes you a whistleblower too. I called Diana, explained Marcus's situation. She agreed to meet with him, though she warned that his legal exposure was complicated. IT professionals who accessed systems without authorization, even for legitimate reasons, often faced prosecution under computer fraud statutes. The optics matter, Diana explained. If Marcus was systematically accessing privileged information without authorization, that's harder to defend than if he noticed something suspicious and investigated. How extensive was his digging? Extensive, I admitted. He pulled 3 years of transaction logs, modification records, access patterns. He basically built a parallel investigation. Diana was quiet. That's going to be challenging. But I'll talk to him. If he cooperated with your whistleblower complaint and can demonstrate he was acting to expose fraud rather than for personal gain, we might have a defense. Wednesday brought the news I'd been expecting but still dreaded. The Atlanta Business Chronicle published a story titled SEC Investigating Meridian Financial Group Following Whistleblower Complaint. It didn't name me, but anyone inside the company would know exactly who had filed. The article cited anonymous, sources describing a multi-million-dollar fraud, allegation and noting that several employees had been placed on administrative leave or terminated. In recent weeks, the comments section filled within hours. Some supportive, good for whoever came forward, but many hostile. Disgruntled employee trying to make a name for themselves. Whistleblowers usually just want attention and money. Probably got fired for incompetence and is making up fraud to cover their failures. Reading the comments was self-harm, but I couldn't stop. This was what Diana had warned about. The court of public opinion where my credibility would be tried long before any legal proceedings concluded. My mother called that afternoon. She'd seen the article. Someone from her church had sent it to her, asking if I was the whistleblower. Baby, tell me what's happening. Tell me the truth, so I did. I told her everything, the whole story spilling out in a rush of pent-up emotion. When I finished, there was silence on the line. Mama? I'm here. I'm trying to decide if I'm more proud of you or terrified for you. Her voice was thick. Your grandmother would be so proud, Aaliyah. So proud, but I'm your mother, and I'm scared. These are powerful people you're fighting. I know. Are you safe? Do you have good lawyers? Do you have enough money? I'm safe. I have excellent lawyers. Money's going to be tight, but I'll manage. I can send you something. Not much, but no, Mama, you've done enough. You got me here. I can handle the rest. That's what I'm afraid of. You've always been so determined to do everything yourself. Sometimes it's okay to let people help, baby. I'm letting lawyers help. I'm letting Simone and Marcus help. I'm not alone. But after we hung up, sitting in my apartment with the evening light fading and the city humming beyond my windows, I felt profoundly alone. The people helping me were professionals doing their jobs or allies with their own stakes in the outcome. Where were the friends who'd support me unconditionally? The colleagues who'd speak up? The community that would rally around someone fighting corruption? Jennifer had offered to tell the truth if asked, but she'd been silent since our coffee shop meeting. Other former colleagues hadn't reached out at all. I was learning the hard lesson that righteous fights are often lonely fights. Thursday morning, Diana called with news. Agent Morrison contacted me. The SEC issued subpoenas to Meridian yesterday. Financial records, emails, internal audits, everything. The company has 30 days to comply. Morrison also mentioned that Meridian's board has hired external counsel and commissioned their own internal investigation. Is that normal? Very. The board needs to show they're taking allegations seriously, especially since Meridian is publicly traded. Shareholders could sue if the board ignored credible fraud allegations. But here's the interesting part. Morrison says the internal investigation is being led by a law firm known for thorough, independent work. That suggests at least some board members want real answers, not a whitewash. So what happens now? Now we wait while investigators do their work. The SEC will review documents, interview witnesses, trace money. Meridian's internal investigators will do the same, looking for evidence of wrongdoing but also potential defenses. Eventually, both investigations will reach conclusions. If those conclusions support your allegations, we're looking at potential criminal charges against individuals and civil penalties against the company. And if they don't, Diana hesitated. If they don't find evidence, or if the evidence is ambiguous, you'll be remembered as the person who filed baseless allegations against your employer. Your career in finance will effectively be over. That's the risk you took when you filed. I'd known this intellectually, but hearing it stated so bluntly made my chest tight. Everything, my entire professional future, hinged on investigators finding what I'd found, confirming what I'd claimed. validating the choice I'd made. Friday afternoon, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I hadn't expected him. We'd been keeping communication minimal on Diana's advice, but he was there, looking exhausted and anxious. "The audit found my access logs," he said, slumping onto my couch. "All of it. Every search, every file pull, every database query. They know I helped you." "What did they say?" "Told me I'm suspended pending investigation. Possible charges for unauthorized system access, breach of confidentiality, maybe computer fraud. They're treating me like I'm a hacker who stole corporate secrets, not an IT professional who exposed corruption." He rubbed his face. "I met with Diana this morning. She's going to represent me, but she was honest. My legal exposure is significant. I didn't just notice something suspicious. I actively investigated, compiled evidence, shared it externally. From a cybersecurity standpoint, that's unauthorized access regardless of intent. This is my fault. I should have—" "Don't," Marcus cut me off. "I'm a grown man who made his own choices. I saw fraud. I knew it was wrong, and I helped expose it. If that cost me my career, at least I can look at myself in the mirror. That's worth something." We sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd been strangers 3 weeks ago, now bound together by the consequences of choosing truth over safety. "You ever wonder if we made a mistake?" Marcus asked quietly. "If we should have just kept our heads down, let someone else deal with it?" "Every day," I admitted. "Multiple times a day. But then I think about $8 million that could have kept being stolen if we'd stayed quiet. About other employees who might have been blamed or fired. About a system that only works if someone's willing to challenge it when it's broken." "That's a nice narrative. Doesn't make the reality less terrifying." "No," I agreed. "It really doesn't." My phone buzzed with an email notification. "Agent Morrison. Subject line. Update." I opened it. Marcus reading over my shoulder. "Ms. Brooks, this is to inform you that our investigation has progressed significantly. We've identified several concerning patterns in Meridian's financial records that align with your allegations. We're expanding the scope of our inquiry and have issued additional subpoenas. I cannot share specifics at this time, but I wanted you to know that your complaint is being taken very seriously, and we are finding substantive evidence of misconduct. Please continue to document any retaliation or intimidation you experience. Agent Rachel Morrison, SEC Enforcement Division." Marcus and I looked at each other. He spoke first. "They're finding it. The fraud, the patterns, the evidence. They're actually finding it. Which means we were right." The words felt surreal. "We were actually right. We were always right. Now we have powerful people who believe us." Marcus stood, some of the exhaustion lifting from his expression. "That changes everything." After he left, I sat with Morrison's email, reading it over and over. Substantive evidence of misconduct. Expanding the scope of inquiry. Words that validated everything I'd risked, everything I'd lost. But validation didn't erase the cost. I was unemployed, under legal siege, publicly marked as a troublemaker. Marcus faced potential prosecution. We'd both sacrificed stability for truth, and there was no guarantee that sacrifice would ultimately be worth it. I thought about Sunday's sermon, about Esther risking her life to save her people, about the phrase that had echoed in my mind, "For such a time as this." Maybe that's what courage was, not the absence of fear or doubt, but the choice to move forward despite both. The choice to believe that some fights were worth fighting even when victory wasn't guaranteed. My grandmother had lived her whole life with her competence unrecognized. She died without ever receiving the promotion she deserved, the acknowledgement she'd earned. I refused to accept that same ending. Even if it cost me everything, even if I ended up broken and unemployed and blacklisted from the industry I'd worked so hard to enter, at least my story would end with me standing up. That had to count for something. Had to mean something. Outside my window, Atlanta glittered in the twilight. A city of ambition and hustle, of people climbing and striving and building careers on foundations they hoped were solid. I'd discovered that my foundation was rotten, that the company I'd trusted was built on fraud. Now the whole structure was beginning to crack, and I was the fault line where everything would eventually break apart. The question was whether I'd survive the collapse, or whether seeking justice would bury me in the rubble. The morning the audit report leaked, I was in Target buying groceries with unemployment money, trying to stretch $67 across a week of meals. My phone exploded with notifications, texts, emails, news alerts, all saying the same thing. Meridian Financial Group's internal investigation had found evidence of systematic financial fraud, totaling over $12 million. $12 million. Not 8, 12. I abandoned my cart and sat on a bench outside the store, hands shaking as I scrolled through the news. The Atlanta Business Chronicle had the exclusive, citing sources familiar with the internal investigation. The report allegedly identified Daniel Whitmore as the primary architect of a scheme that had diverted company funds through shell subsidiaries over 4 years. Multiple senior executives were implicated. The board had accepted the CFO's immediate resignation and contacted federal prosecutors. My phone rang. Diana, have you seen the news? I'm looking at it now. Diana, they found more than I did. $12 million. Because you gave them the roadmap. Your complaint told investigators where to look, what patterns to trace. This doesn't happen without you, Aaliyah. You need to understand that. Agent Morrison called 10 minutes later. Ms. Brooks, I wanted you to hear this directly from me before it becomes public. We're filing criminal charges against Daniel Whitmore and 3 other Meridian executives. Wire fraud, falsification of records, conspiracy to defraud. We're also pursuing civil penalties against the company itself. Your cooperation was instrumental in building this case. When will charges be filed? Monday morning. We're coordinating with the Department of Justice on the prosecution strategy. I wanted to give you advance warning because once charges are public, media attention will intensify. Your name will likely come out as the whistleblower who initiated the investigation. I thought whistleblower identities were protected. They are to an extent. But in criminal proceedings, defendants have a right to confront their accusers. If you're called as a witness, which you likely will be, your identity becomes part of the public record. I'm sorry, I know this isn't what you signed up for. After she hung up, I sat in Target's parking lot watching people come and go with their shopping carts and ordinary problems, and I felt the weight of what was coming. My name, my face, my story, all about to become public in ways I couldn't control. The weekend was a blur of preparing. Diana came to my apartment Saturday afternoon with a media consultant named Trevor, a black man in his 50s who'd worked with corporate whistleblowers before. Here's what's going to happen, Trevor said, setting up his laptop on my dining table. Monday, federal prosecutors announce charges. Media will scramble to identify the whistleblower. Someone, probably someone at Meridian who's angry, will leak your name within 24 hours. By Tuesday, you'll have reporters at your door, photographers outside, your social media profiles scrutinized for anything controversial or embarrassing. How do I stop it? You don't stop it. You manage it. We're going to prepare a statement, brief, professional, emphasizing your commitment to truth and integrity. We'll create a simple website with the statement and contact information for Diana, directing all inquiries to her. We'll lock down your social media, review everything you've ever posted for potential ammunition someone could use against you. We spent 4 hours combing through my digital footprint. Thank God I'd always been careful online. No drunken photos, no inflammatory political posts, nothing that could be weaponized. The most controversial thing in my history was a tweet criticizing the Falcons' playoff performance 3 years ago. You're remarkably clean, Trevor said, almost disappointed. That's good. Makes you harder to discredit. Diana had been quiet, reading something on her phone. Now she looked up. There's something else we need to discuss. Meridian's board issued a statement this afternoon. They're claiming they were unaware of the fraud and are committed to full cooperation with authorities and implementing enhanced oversight procedures. That's good, right? They're acknowledging the problem. It's self-preservation. By claiming ignorance and promising reform, they're trying to minimize corporate liability and protect shareholder value. But here's the interesting part. The statement specifically mentions they're reviewing personnel actions taken during the investigation to ensure no whistleblower retaliation occurred. That's corporate speak for we might reinstate Aaliyah and Marcus to avoid a retaliation lawsuit. I don't want to go back. You don't have to. But if they offer reinstatement plus back pay plus damages, that's a settlement we should seriously consider. It would give you financial stability while you figure out your next move. My mother called Sunday evening. She'd seen the news, put the pieces together. "Baby, I'm coming to Atlanta." "Mama, you don't need to." "I'm coming. Your brother can handle things here for a few days. You're about to go through something difficult and you shouldn't be alone." I didn't argue. Truth was, I wanted my mother. Wanted someone who'd known me before I became the whistleblower. Someone who'd remind me I was still Aaliyah Brooks, not just a news story. She arrived Sunday night, hugged me so tight I could barely breathe, and immediately started cooking, her solution to every crisis. By Monday morning, my apartment smelled like her cornbread and collard greens. Sense of home and stability. The charges were announced at 10 a.m. Diana, Marcus, and I watched the press conference live from my apartment, my mother sitting beside me holding my hand. The U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia stood at a podium, flanked by SEC and FBI officials. "Today we are announcing charges against 4 individuals in connection with a systematic fraud scheme at Meridian Financial Group that diverted over $12 million in corporate funds through fraudulent transactions." Marcus exhaled slowly. "They're really doing it. They're actually prosecuting." The press conference detailed the charges. Daniel Whitmore faced 18 counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of records. 3 other executives, including the VP of Operations who'd been in that Thursday meeting, faced similar charges. The U.S. Attorney mentioned that the investigation began with a courageous whistleblower who came forward despite personal and professional risk. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, one after another. Diana had instructed me not to answer any of them. By noon, my name was public. A reporter for Reuters cited sources close to the investigation, identifying me as the former Meridian analyst who'd filed the initial complaint. By 1 p.m., there were 3 reporters outside my apartment building. By 3 p.m., my face was on the local news. Trevor's prediction had been perfect. We released my prepared statement through Diana's office. I am grateful that federal authorities have validated the concerns I raised about financial irregularities at Meridian Financial Group. My only goal was to ensure the truth came to light. I hope this case demonstrates that individuals who speak up about corporate wrongdoing will be protected and supported. I will not be giving interviews at this time. All inquiries should be directed to my attorney, Diana Okonkwo. The statement was professional, measured, boring. Exactly what Trevor had advised. Don't be emotional. Don't be vindictive. Don't give them anything that can be twisted or sensationalized. But the media found drama anyway. They dug up my LinkedIn profile, my college achievements, my grandmother's obituary from 7 years ago. They found Jennifer and other former colleagues, asking for quotes about my character and competence. Some defended me. Aaliyah was always thorough and ethical, but others were less generous. An anonymous quote, probably from someone loyal to Daniel, claimed I'd been struggling with my workload and became fixated on conspiracy theories about the company. Tuesday morning brought an unexpected development. Jennifer called. "I'm testifying," she said without preamble. The SEC investigators contacted me. They want to know about the culture at Meridian, about Daniel's management style, about what happened in that meeting where he humiliated you. "I'm going to tell them everything." "Jennifer, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. I've been a coward long enough. You did the brave thing, and I watched it happen, and I stayed silent to protect my job. But my daughter asked me last night why you were on the news, and I had to explain what a whistleblower is. She said, 'That lady is a hero, right?' And I realized I couldn't look my daughter in the eye and tell her to always do the right thing when I haven't been doing it myself." Her voice cracked. "I'm not trying to make this about me or pretend I'm some kind of hero now. I want to help. If my testimony can support your case or strengthen the investigation, I want to provide it." "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." After we hung up, I told my mother what Jennifer had said. She smiled. That knowing smile she got when life proved something she'd always believed. "Truth has a way of gathering people to it," she said. "Like light drawing moths. The lie can only hold so long before people get tired of defending it." Wednesday brought the call I'd been half expecting, half dreading. "Patricia from Meridian's HR department." "Aaliyah, I'm calling to inform you that the company is offering to reinstate you to your position with full back pay, benefits, and a formal apology for any retaliation you experienced. We'd also like to offer you a promotion to senior analyst and a raise of 23%. I put her on speaker so Diana and my mother could hear. That's generous, I said carefully. Can you send the offer in writing? Of course. But Aaliyah, I want you to know this comes from the board level. They recognize that you acted with integrity and that the company failed to support you appropriately. We'd very much like you to return. After the call ended, Diana leaned back in her chair. 23% raise plus promotion plus back pay. That's probably a $60,000 package including what you've lost. That's a serious offer. I don't want to go back there. Then we use this as leverage. Tell them you'll consider returning only if they also reinstate Marcus with similar terms and commit to implementing the reforms they've been promising publicly. Make them demonstrate real change, not just words. Over the next week, we negotiated. Meridian, desperate to avoid prolonged litigation and more negative publicity, agreed to everything. Marcus would be reinstated with a promotion to senior systems analyst and a raise. The company would establish a new whistleblower protection program with external oversight. They'd fund ethics training for all employees. And they'd pay me and Marcus a substantial settlement, officially for stress and reputational harm, in exchange for releasing them from further liability. The settlement was enough that I could breathe. Could take time to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. Could finish this fight without destroying myself financially. But the most important moment came 2 weeks after the charges were announced. Agent Morrison called with an update. Daniel Whitmore's attorney contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. He's offering to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a reduced sentence. Claims there were other people involved, higher up the chain. Claims he can provide evidence. He's flipping? Seems like it. Fraud cases are like Russian nesting dolls. You open one, you find another inside. Your initial complaint started this, but it looks like the corruption went deeper than even you realized. That night, I sat on my couch with my mother, watching the sunset paint my apartment in shades of amber and gold. Are you okay? She asked. Really okay? I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months when the trial is over and I've figured out what I'm doing with my life. Your grandmother would be so proud. You know that, right? I hope so. I know so. She spent 40 years being overlooked, but she never stopped believing that truth mattered. You proved her right. My mother squeezed my hand. You proved that speaking up, even when it costs you, even when you're scared, can actually change things. That's not nothing, baby. That's everything. 3 weeks after the charges were announced, I got an email from a name I recognized but hadn't expected. Dr. Patricia Chen, Director of the Ethics and Compliance Program at Georgia State University's Business School. Dear Ms. Brooks, I've been following your case with great interest. Your actions demonstrate exactly the kind of ethical courage we try to teach our students, but which is rarely modeled so clearly in the real world. I would like to invite you to speak to our graduate students about your experience as a whistleblower, the decision-making process you went through, and the personal and professional costs of choosing integrity over convenience. We could offer an honorarium of $2,500 for a 90-minute session. Please let me know if you'd be interested. Sincerely, Dr. Patricia Chen. I stared at the email for a long time. An invitation to teach, to share my story, to help shape how the next generation of business professionals thought about ethics and accountability. I called Diana. I got invited to speak at Georgia State about whistleblowing and ethics. Is that okay legally? As long as you don't discuss details of ongoing investigations or settlement terms, you're free to share your general experience. Actually, I'd encourage it. Public speaking positions you as an expert in corporate ethics and whistleblower protection. That's a valuable professional identity if you decide not to return to traditional finance. After we hung up, I replied to Dr. Chen, accepting the invitation. Maybe this was what came next. Not returning to the world that had tried to silence me, but building something new. Becoming someone who helped others navigate the impossible choices I'd faced. Teaching people that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite fear. My mother left Friday morning, satisfied that I was stable and surrounded by support. Before she left, she pulled me into a hug. Remember what I told you when you first called? That sometimes the right path is the one that scares you most? I remember. You took that path. And you didn't just survive it, you changed things. Changed a company, changed people's lives, changed yourself. I'm so proud of you I could burst. And your grandmother is up there grinning, saying, "That's my grandbaby. That's my legacy." After she left, I stood in my apartment. The same apartment where I'd compiled evidence, where I'd made the decision to file a complaint, where I'd waited through weeks of uncertainty and fear. The space felt different now. Not because anything physical had changed, but because I had changed. I'd entered this fight as Aaliyah Brooks, junior analyst, trying to prove she belonged. I was emerging as someone else, someone who'd learned that belonging wasn't about fitting into systems that were broken. It was about having the courage to break them when necessary. Daniel Whitmore's trial was scheduled for the following spring. I'd be called as a witness, would have to face him in court, would have to relive the humiliation and fear publicly. But I'd also stand there knowing I'd been right, knowing I'd spoken truth even when truth was dangerous, knowing that $8 million, no, $12 million, had been recovered because one junior analyst refused to stay quiet. That was worth something. That was worth everything. Outside my window, Atlanta hummed with its endless ambition, its relentless forward motion. I was part of that motion now, not as someone trying to climb a corporate ladder, but as someone who'd learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is knock the ladder down when it's built on lies, and stand tall in the rubble, unbroken. 6 months later, I stood in front of 73 graduate students at Georgia State University's business school, my hands only slightly trembling as I adjusted the microphone. Dr. Chen had introduced me with words I still wasn't comfortable hearing. Courageous, principled, a model of ethical leadership. But I was learning to accept that my story meant something to people beyond myself. "I want to start by telling you the truth about being a whistleblower," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's not heroic. It's terrifying. It's months of second-guessing every decision, wondering if you've destroyed your career for nothing, watching your savings dwindle while you wait for investigations that move at glacial speed. The movies make it look noble. The reality is lonely and expensive and filled with doubt." I clicked to my first slide, a photo of the Meridian Financial Group building, the gleaming tower where I'd once been so proud to work. But here's the other truth. Staying silent is worse. Staying silent means watching theft continue, means being complicit through inaction, means looking at yourself in the mirror every day, knowing you chose comfort over integrity. The students were rapt, notebooks open, recording devices running. I'd been nervous about this talk for weeks. But standing here, sharing my story with people who'd face similar choices someday, it felt right. Felt purposeful. I walked them through the timeline, the initial discovery, the humiliation in the conference room, the decision to go external, the investigation, the charges, the aftermath. I was careful to avoid details that were still protected by legal agreements, but I gave them the emotional truth, the human cost of speaking up. The question I get asked most is, would you do it again? I paused, letting the question hang. 6 months ago, honestly, I wasn't sure. I was unemployed, blacklisted in the industry, dealing with media attention I never wanted. But then the trial happened. Daniel Whitmore's trial had been a spectacle. 3 weeks of testimony, expert witnesses, financial analysts explaining complex fraud schemes to a jury of ordinary citizens. I'd been on the stand for 2 days, cross-examined by expensive defense attorneys who tried every trick to discredit me. They'd questioned my competence, my motives, my interpretation of data. But the evidence was undeniable. The money trail was clear, and when the jury delivered their verdict, guilty on 16 of 18 counts, I'd felt something shift inside me. Validation, yes, but also closure. The truth I'd fought for had been officially recognized, legally established, impossible to deny. Daniel Whitmore was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, I told the students. The other executives received similar sentences. Meridian Financial Group paid $23 million in fines and restitution. The SEC awarded me and another whistleblower, Marcus Hayes, who's here with me today, a combined award of just over $3 million through their whistleblower program. Marcus stood in the back of the room and waved. We'd become genuine friends through this ordeal, bonded by shared trauma and shared victory. He'd used his portion of the award to start a cybersecurity consulting firm focused on helping companies identify vulnerabilities before they could be exploited. I'd used mine to pay off my student loans and create a financial cushion while I figured out what came next. So yes, I continued, knowing what I know now, I would do it again. Because $12 million was recovered. Because fraud was stopped. Because other employees were protected from being scapegoated. Because the system, despite all its flaws, actually worked when someone was brave enough to test it. I clicked to my final slide, a photo of my grandmother, taken in the 1970s, standing outside the accounting firm where she'd worked for 40 years. She was young in the photo, maybe 30, wearing her professional best and smiling with the kind of hope I recognized because I'd felt it too. The hope that hard work and competence would be enough. This is my grandmother, Aaliyah Brooks. She was a bookkeeper who never got promoted despite being more skilled than most of the accountants above her. She caught countless errors, saved the company thousands of dollars, and died without ever receiving the recognition she deserved. My voice caught slightly. I did this for her. For every person who's been overlooked, underestimated, silenced. For everyone who's been told they don't understand when they understand perfectly. They just see something inconvenient. The students applauded. Dr. Chen opened the floor for questions. A young black woman in the front row raised her hand. How did you handle the isolation? When everyone at work turned against you? I didn't handle it well, honestly. I isolated further, which made it worse. If I could do it over, I'd build a support network earlier. Find other whistleblowers, join advocacy groups, get therapy. You can't fight institutional corruption alone. You need people who understand what you're going through. An Asian man in his late 20s. What about the financial risk? Not everyone can afford to be unemployed for months. That's the hardest part. Whistleblower protections exist, but they're not immediate. The SEC award came 18 months after I filed my complaint. Without savings and eventual settlement money, I would have been destroyed financially. That's a structural problem. The system expects people to be financially stable enough to fight, which excludes most people who'd be in a position to witness corporate fraud. I paused. That's something we need to change. Whistleblowers need immediate financial support, not just eventual awards. A white woman in her 30s. Do you think being a black woman made this harder? Unquestionably, my credibility was questioned in ways it wouldn't have been if I were a white man with identical credentials. The CFO who dismissed me publicly knew exactly what he was doing. He was banking on unconscious bias to make people doubt me automatically. That's why documentation was so crucial. I couldn't just be right. I had to be undeniably, provably, excessively right in ways that couldn't be explained away. We talked for another 45 minutes. Every question revealed how deeply these students were thinking about ethics and integrity and the compromises they feared they'd have to make in their careers. When Dr. Chen finally wrapped up the session, a line of students formed to speak with me individually. Many wanted advice about specific situations they'd encountered. Bosses asking them to fudge numbers, colleagues taking credit for their work, companies cutting corners on safety or compliance. I gave what guidance I could, but mostly I listened, validated that their concerns were legitimate, reminded them that their instincts for right and wrong mattered even when systems tried to override those instincts. The last person in line was the young black woman who'd asked the first question. Up close, she couldn't have been more than 24, with natural hair in elegant braids and eyes that held both determination and fear. I work part-time at a financial services company while I'm in grad school, she said quietly. I've noticed some things that don't add up, but I'm terrified to say anything because I need this job to pay tuition. What kind of things? Client accounts being charged fees that aren't authorized. Small amounts, $20 here, $50 there, but it's happening across hundreds of accounts. I ran the numbers. It's probably pulling in an extra $40,000 a month in unauthorized charges. My chest tightened. This was exactly how it started. Small irregularities that seemed insignificant until you added them up and realized the scale. Have you documented what you've found? Screenshots, yes, but I don't know what to do with them. I can't afford to lose this job, but I also can't ignore what I'm seeing. I pulled out one of my new business cards, simple, professional, listing me as an ethics consultant and whistleblower advocate. It was the identity I'd been building over the past 6 months, turning my experience into expertise that could help others. Email me. We'll talk through your options. There are ways to report that provide protection, and there are organizations that offer support to whistleblowers who can't afford the financial risk. You don't have to choose between your ethics and your survival, though I know it feels that way. She took the card, relief flooding her expression. Thank you. I've been feeling so alone with this. You're not alone. That's what I'm trying to build. A network so people like us don't have to navigate this alone. After she left, Marcus and I walked to a nearby coffee shop. It had become our ritual after these speaking events. Debrief, process, remind each other why we were doing this work. That was good, Marcus said, stirring sugar into his coffee. You're getting more comfortable with the public speaking thing. It's easier when I remember it's not about me. It's about giving other people permission to speak up, showing them it's possible to survive this. Think that student will report what she found? I hope so, but I'll understand if she doesn't. That's the thing I'm learning. We can't expect everyone to be as reckless as we were. Some people have circumstances that genuinely prevent them from taking risks. Our job is to make it easier for the people who can take risks and safer for everyone else. My phone buzzed. An email from a law firm in Chicago, asking if I'd be willing to serve as an expert witness in a whistleblower retaliation case. It was the third such request this month. My story had made me visible in the corporate ethics world, and lawyers wanted someone who could testify about the whistleblower experience from the inside. Another expert witness request, I told Marcus. Banking case. They're offering $10,000 for testimony and case review. You taking it? Probably. The money's good, and it's work that matters. Plus, it lets me be useful without being employed by anyone who could silence me. I smiled slightly. Turns out getting blacklisted from traditional finance opened up a whole different career path. Marcus laughed. Silver lining. Corporate America's loss is the ethics consulting world's gain. We talked about his business. He'd landed 3 new clients in the past month. Companies wanting to audit their systems after seeing what had happened at Meridian. We talked about Jennifer, who'd been promoted to senior analyst and had become an internal champion for ethics at the reorganized Meridian. We talked about the broader landscape of corporate fraud and how many cases probably went unreported because people were too afraid or too isolated to speak up. We should write a book, Marcus said suddenly, about this whole experience. How we found the fraud, how we gathered evidence, how we survived the aftermath. Make it a resource for other people who might face similar situations. A handbook for aspiring whistleblowers? More like a reality check. Demystify it, show both the costs and the possibilities. Let people make informed decisions instead of romantic ones. I considered it. A book would be exposure, would be permanent, would be one more way of owning this identity I'd never asked for. But it would also be useful. Would be the resource I'd wished existed when I was standing in that conference room being humiliated, wondering if I was crazy or courageous, or just catastrophically naive. Let's do it, I decided. But we get final approval on everything. No ghostwriter spinning our story into something we don't recognize. Deal. That evening, I attended a gathering organized by the National Whistleblower Center, a support group for people who'd blown the whistle on corporate or government misconduct. There were about 30 people in the room, ranging from a 70-year-old former EPA scientist who'd reported environmental violations to a 26-year-old tech worker who'd exposed user data breaches. Every person had a story. Every story involved sacrifice, and every person in that room understood something the outside world never quite grasped. The decision to speak up wasn't a moment. It was a process, ongoing and exhausting, that continued long after the initial disclosure. We shared resources, legal contacts, coping strategies. We celebrated victories, a case that resulted in criminal charges, a settlement that provided financial stability, a policy change that protected future employees. We acknowledged defeats, investigations that went nowhere, careers that never recovered, relationships that crumbled under the pressure. You're new to this, an older white man said to me during the break. He'd blown the whistle on defense contractor fraud 15 years ago, 6 months out. Still in the aftermath stage. Does it get easier? It gets different. Less raw but more complicated. You start seeing fraud everywhere because now you know what to look for. You become the person everyone comes to with their suspicions, which is exhausting, but also meaningful. Your identity shifts from person who exposed wrongdoing to person who helps others expose wrongdoing. That transition is hard because it means accepting this is part of who you are now. I'm not sure I want it to define me. It won't define you, but it will shape you, like any significant experience. The question is whether you let it make you bitter or whether you channel it into something generative. Later, a younger Latina woman approached me. I heard you speak at Georgia State. I'm a journalist with ProPublica. We're doing a series on corporate whistleblowers and the systemic barriers they face. Would you be willing to be interviewed? I thought about visibility, about exposure, about becoming even more publicly associated with whistleblowing. But I also thought about that student with the credit card fraud evidence, about Jennifer finding courage to speak up, about all the people who needed to know that speaking up was possible. Yes, I said. I'll do the interview. 3 months later, the ProPublica article came out. The Real Cost of Corporate Courage, What Happens After Whistleblowers Speak Up. It featured interviews with me, Marcus, and a dozen other whistleblowers. It detailed the financial, psychological, and professional costs. But it also documented the changes we'd catalyzed, the frauds we'd stopped, the systems we'd helped reform. The article went viral. I got invited to speak at conferences, universities, corporate ethics trainings. Companies started reaching out, asking me to review their whistleblower protection policies, to help create cultures where employees felt safe raising concerns. I'd become, somehow, an accidental expert in something I'd never wanted to know about. But on a Tuesday evening in late spring, I stood in the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, the church where Dr. King had preached, speaking to a gathering of young Black professionals about ethics, courage, and the responsibility that came with being educated and positioned to see wrongdoing. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strategy, I said, echoing the line I'd used before. My grandmother taught me to be quiet and observant, to see what others missed. That silence served me well in gathering evidence, in documenting fraud, in building a case. But there comes a moment when silence transforms from strategy to complicity. The art is knowing when that transformation happens. I looked out at the faces. So many young, ambitious, brilliant people trying to navigate corporate America while staying true to themselves. I can't tell you when that moment comes for you. Everyone's circumstances are different. Everyone's risk tolerance is different. But I can tell you this. If you choose to speak up, you won't be alone. There's a community of people who've walked this path, who understand the cost, who will support you, and there's power in that. Power in knowing that your voice, even when it trembles, can change things. After the speech, a young man approached me. He looked familiar, and it took me a moment to place him. Jerome, the security guard from Meridian's lobby, who'd always greeted me with stories about his grandson. Ms. Brooks. I heard you were speaking tonight. Had to come see you. Jerome, how's your grandson? Still playing baseball? Starting pitcher for his high school team now. Got scouts looking at him. His smile was proud, then turned serious. I wanted to thank you. After everything happened at Meridian, they reorganized the whole company. New management, new policies. They even started paying us security guards better, giving us real benefits. Said it was part of treating all employees with respect. He shook his head. You did that. You made them remember they can't just treat people like we don't matter. I felt my throat tighten. I was just trying to stop fraud, Jerome. I didn't think about broader impacts. That's how change happens, though. You fix one thing, and it forces people to look at everything else. My grandson's going to have opportunities I never had, because his granddaddy can afford to help with college now. That's because of you. After he left, I stood outside the church in the warm spring evening, watching people disperse to their cars and their lives. Atlanta glowed in the dusk, familiar and beautiful, and full of people fighting their own battles, making their own choices about when to speak and when to stay silent. My phone rang. My mother. Baby, I just watched the video of your church speech. Someone posted it on Facebook. Mama, I thought you didn't use Facebook. I don't. Your cousin sent it to me. Aaliyah, you were magnificent. You found your voice, your purpose. I'm so proud I could cry. I'm still figuring it out, Mama. Still not sure where this all leads. It leads exactly where it needs to. You're helping people. You're making change. You're honoring your grandmother's legacy while building your own. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. After we hung up, I walked through the Atlanta streets toward my apartment. Tomorrow I had a consultation call with a healthcare worker who'd witnessed insurance fraud. Next week, I was speaking at Emory University's Business Ethics Symposium. The following month, I was serving as an expert witness in a securities fraud trial. This was my life now. Not the life I'd planned when I walked into Meridian Financial Group 3 years ago with my pressed suit and my ambition and my certainty that competence would be enough. But it was a life that mattered. A life that helped people. A life built on the rubble of the career I'd lost and the innocence I'd shed in the silence I'd broken. I'd started this journey as a junior analyst who'd found some discrepancies in financial reports. I'd become someone else entirely. Someone who understood that truth was expensive, but silence was even costlier. Someone who'd learned that the system didn't protect people like us unless we forced it to. Someone who'd discovered that her voice, even when it shook with fear, could echo far beyond one conference room, one company, one moment of choosing courage over comfort. My grandmother had lived her whole life quiet, had died with her competence unrecognized. I would not have the same ending. My story, our story, mine and Marcus's and Jennifer's and everyone who'd found courage in impossible moments, would be told, would be heard, would help the next person standing where I'd stood, wondering if speaking up would destroy them. Sometimes it would. Sometimes the cost would be too high and the consequences too severe and the sacrifice too great. But sometimes, often enough to matter, speaking up would change things. Would stop fraud, would protect people, would shift the calculus so that the next generation had slightly better odds of being heard. That was worth fighting for, worth the career I'd lost, and the fear I'd felt, and the uncertainty I still carried. Truth, I'd learned, wasn't a destination. It was a direction, and I was walking in it, one difficult step at a time, toward a future I couldn't yet see but was helping to build. For such a time as this.